Cindy with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery, and this is Speak Out on Stigma. Today we'll be hearing from Luke. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Cindy. How are you?
Great, great. I'm good. So tell me, if you told someone about your substance use disorder, how do you think the stigma associated with it would affect the way they treat you?
Yeah, great question. So let me first say that I do think that substance use disorder writ large has become less stigmatized in recent years. Say largely thanks to, the heroic efforts of both people that are in the public eye. I'm thinking most recently of Matthew Perry, but also courageous, individual family members who over the last several years have felt comfortable raising their hand and saying, "Hey, I have a problem and I need help." That being said, every time I tell a new person that I am personally in recovery, there's a moment where I kind of emotionally brace for impact. And what I mean by that is that I'm really opening myself up to whatever reaction they have to that news. And as someone who often craves control, the lack of control in that moment in terms of how they're going to respond is incredibly scary, right?
Mhm.
And what I've noticed is that individuals often respond to the sharing of my story of recovery, and through the prism of how they have experienced substance use disorder in their own lives. So maybe they struggled with one or more substances themselves, or maybe they have a loved one or a friend who struggled. It's really in those moments that they're looking at me through the kind of, again, that prism of their own lived experience. And perhaps they had a partner or a parent with some unresolved trauma, or there was covering up, whatever the experience was, whether positive or negative, is how that person sees me in that moment. So I would say it's not necessarily a stigma against substance use disorder as a whole, but instead a stigma against the notion that people with substance use disorder behave uniformly, right? Maybe because that person's parent was a very mean alcoholic. To them, that often means that I, as an alcoholic, must be one too, right? Or if a former spouse lied and concealed their usage, then I must do that too. Again, because we're all uniformly the same. And the reality is we handle addiction in a very different ways. Sadly, I've had friendships dissolve as a result of my recovery story of sharing that, mostly because the other person had such a negative experience with somebody else with a substance use disorder previously that they simply could not take the chance of being hurt again by someone else. And I totally empathize from where they were coming. All I ask is in those initial moments when you share your story, we recognize that every person is different, including every person with a substance use disorder, right? If we automatically dismiss someone because they were brave enough to admit the recovery, what that does is actually runs the risk of that person no longer being comfortable sharing their story.
Mhm.
And as I stated at the beginning, we need people to share their stories, primarily to help those who aren't yet in recovery, and want to learn that it's safe for them to do so. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you want people to know and remember about those who are seeking or in recovery?
When I first entered my own journey of recovery, I devoured every piece of literature and news that I possibly could to learn about it, because I viewed it as largely a mental experience. If I can just train my brain, if I can just get smart enough, I can somehow outsmart my addiction. And interestingly, I read part of that things that approximately, I think it was like 7 out of every 10 uh, young people who are getting a treatment for substance use disorder had a history of some sort of exposure to childhood trauma. So about 70% of those young people had, one or more severely traumatic experiences. And that could take many forms, including physical or emotional abuse, maybe the tragic passing of a loved one, financial struggles, etc. And in the absence of robust mental health care availability, many look to escape the memories of those bad childhood experiences through the ingestion of one or more substances. I know I did, right? I started drinking alcohol when I was 14. And so the first thing I would want people to know about those seeking or currently in recovery is that there are painful catalysts which often got them started on the path of addiction. Now, that does not excuse any subsequent behavior, but it's merely a recognition that we are all human and wounded, I would say, in our own way. I'd say the second thing I would want people to know and remember is often the hardest thing to do is ask for help. When I was in the throes of my addiction, my self-esteem was about as low as you could possibly get, right? As an addict, I didn't feel like I was largely worthy to occupy space on this earth. And often the intake of my substance, in this case, alcohol, was designed to drown out that negative voice reminding me of all of my numerous faults and how I didn't measure up. And I knew I had a problem years before I ever sought help. Years. And when I finally did ask for assistance, it was only after someone had already demonstrated their own courage in sharing their own journey to recovery. Because I'll never forget the moment I'm in graduate school and a fellow grad student raises his hand and he says, hey, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and shared his story. And at that exact moment, I was like, oh gosh, I got to talk to this guy. But even then, even after that aha moment, it still took me months before I really built up the courage to actually approach him. And when I did the classic, yeah, a friend of mine thinks he's got a problem. And luckily, this counterpart, he was wise and he immediately saw through the veneer that I was putting on. But I often ask myself, why did it take me so long to ask for help? I think for one, honestly, I didn't think I deserved it, right? My self-esteem was so low. Part of me believed I wasn't really worthy of help. But I also had built up this emotional wall around me as a result of the childhood trauma I spoke about, that letting my guard down and being vulnerable was just about the scariest thing I could possibly imagine, right? So what if I asked for help and this person said no? What if you mocked me? What if you told me I was no good, right? What if you repeated a lot of the messages that I was hearing in my head? My fragile ego could not handle that. So for a while, I convinced myself it was simply better to not even broach the subject at all. And even after I embarked on my own journey of recovery, I still had, and I would say have, trouble oftentimes asking for help. And that's where I would say the unsolicited outreach of friends and family can make such a huge difference. To know that I was loved by others unconditionally without me needing to prompt them to say it, it gave me the juice to keep going in those moments when all I wanted to do was give up. So my advice to anyone who knows someone that's struggling with addiction, substance use disorder, or even they're in recovery, just reach out to them. Even if it's a simple, hey, thinking of you text message, because that simple act or simple gesture can make all the difference in the world, because I know it did for me.
So that openness and that support, and
Exactly.
talking about how they really go hand in hand.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
For all of you who are looking and embarking on your own journey, I wish you absolutely nothing but the best of luck. And I love you. And if I can ever be of assistance, please, somehow find a way to reach out to me.
Okay, thank you so much, Luke, for sharing your views on stigma. And thank you to our viewers for watching. Speak Out on Stigma is a forum to raise awareness about the harmful impact of stigma on those in and seeking recovery. Recovery is for everyone. Together, we can eliminate stigma. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Thank you and have a great day.